Hello again, this is once more your friend Dr. Jimmy, and this is now my 22nd video on my history of the event Universal Orlando Halloween Horror Nights 23, What Evil Has Taken Root, that was held at Universal Studios Florida in the year 2013. In my previous video I had gone to great length describing much of the early events of the legendary Truth game that had actually begun way back in summer with various events and things online, and then had started playing in park from the moment the event began. Quite fun. And I talked about many of the various tasks in park, solving puzzles, finding scanners, scanning your cards in specific order on the various Legion scanners as well as the house scanners, that sort of thing. It got a bit repetitive, but it had to be done in order to score up points for each of your Legion. But I had not got to yet one of the most interesting tasks we had that year, perhaps the most entertaining specific task, and that was finding the lazy bastard. So, who's the lazy bastard? Well, it goes back to the first legendary Truth game that was played back in 2008, when we were trying to solve some of the mysteries of the mysterious Dr. Mary Agana, Bloody Mary herself, and her connections in history and with her various victims, those patients, and that in fact there was some odd connection between her and her family history and those of the patients as well, connecting to all the houses and scare zones of the event as well, interestingly and strangely. Rather intriguing game. You can see all about it by going back and watching my 2008 videos. I did that history a while ago. But my history of Halloween Horror Nights 18. Go back and watch those. You want to know more about it. But the lazy bastard was a strange fellow we met in Amity Village. A salty old sea dog, yeah, who was hanging around in Amity. Remember Amity Village? I miss Amity Village. It wasn't there by 2013, but back in 2008, of course, it was. And he gave us some very important clues concerning the strange connected history of the various victims of Mary Agana that we had seen on the website, and to Agana herself, going back to the origins of Bloody Mary in Cary, Ohio. So all very interesting stuff we learned about from this old sea dog, the sea captain there with his fisherman's cap and his sunglasses and his pipe, like Poop Deck Pappy from the Popeye cartoons is what he kind of reminds. So we saw this fellow, and of course it was portrayed by none other than Rick Spencer. But we saw the old lazy bastard, and he'd promised a boat ride. We never got the boat ride. Well, actually we did. Eventually they all got a boat ride on Amity, on the Jaws ride on the final night, with the lazy bastard took us on a boat ride for the Jaws ride. The ones who took that ride are lucky they got out alive, as we would now discover. It's not always a good thing to go riding with that old sea captain. Where did the name Lazy Bastard come from? Well, when we wanted the boat ride and were asking for it, would we get the boat ride, we were told by a person involved in Legendary Truth, allegedly, that the reason we hadn't got it is because the captain is a lazy bastard, and the name caught on, and that's how we referred to the captain ever since, Captain Lazy Bastard, in the various online things. Although eventually they did get the boat ride on that final night of 2008. So that's who we're trying to find. And there were clues. I don't remember what the clues were, but they were pretty obvious. Where do you find the lazy bastard? Well, you can't go to Amity. On Fisherman's Wharf dock, of course, where the shark still hangs. And that's where we found the Captain Lazy Bastard. But once we identified where he was, we had to go at separate times on that night. A special time slot for each of the 6 Legion bloodlines. So a group of Bacanoids would interview him during 1 half-hour period, and then a group of Mashorians, the next one, and Cerebin, Strengoid that way. And each interview would ask the captain questions, and he would answer, sometimes very evasively. Sometimes he would say something that might be a bit of a clue. Sometimes he would try to dodge the subject. He's a dodgy bastard at best of times. And basically, everyone had to do their interview, share data a little bit, or keep some things themselves and try to decipher what them meant. But at the course of these interviews, the consensus was that it was that sea captain himself who had taken Richard Steerington for a ride in his boat. Yes, he was the one who took Richard Steerington out on a cruise on his boat. That's the boat ride that Ignatia Himmel kept saying, where's Richard Steerington? He went for a boat cruise. Turns out, when we finally put all the pieces together, and eventually the answers were given at the end of the event in some newspaper articles that popped up on the website. But we figured it out beforehand, pretty much, but this is what was the answer. Ignatia Himmel had deliberately got rid of Richard Steerington in 2010. She had hired this man whose real name was Larry Manley. The lazy bastard's real name was Larry Manley. Doesn't that sound like a 70s porn star name? I think so. Anyway, so Larry Manley, the captain, lazy bastard, takes Richard Steerington, who at that time was still the CEO of Legendary Truth, on a boat cruise. And they're riding along. And he kept saying, oh yeah, I took him for a boat ride because he was my chum. And we began to figure out what he meant by the word chum. He chopped him up and threw him overboard to the sharks, literally making him into chum. So it was the lazy bastard who murdered Richard Steerington on the orders of Ignatia Himmel. At least that's what we had deciphered then, although Ignatia Himmel denies that to this day and would call that slanderous, libelous lies, just like Donald Trump. It never happened, never happened. No, you can't prove it happened. I don't care if there's videotape of me saying those things. I never said them. You're all liars. Lie, lie, lie. You crooked liars. It's your fault, not mine. Ignatia Himmel is very similar to that. As we discovered in recent years. At the time, however, she wasn't around. We didn't know what she thought, and it just seemed very, very obvious. She had, and probably Gabriel Fell was behind the whole thing too. So that's what happened to Richard Steerington, and that's why he was no longer running Legendary Truth, and why Fell and Himmel took over in 2010. And this bastard was behind it. And according to the newspaper articles we saw after the event was over, he got apprehended after our interviews with him and ended up going to jail to serve for his naughty crimes. All right. Now, as I said, we split up by bloodline for these interviews, and the event started to become increasingly competitive for bloodline. More and more there were clues that each legion had to solve and were given different information, and they'd have to figure it out themselves and compete with the other legions, the other groups. So those who had registered as Bacanoids had to work together. Those who had been Morphins had to work together against the others in competitive things and figuring out clues. And it went beyond just clues, it went to the house scanning tasks as well, because now new cards were developed. There's a card called the Alliance card, and we had to select a leader amongst our group. Now, people wanted me or Charles to be leader of the Bacanoids, but we declined because I couldn't be there every night, and I figured let someone else take over. And so I suggested, and eventually she proved quite up to the task, a girl named April. And it's a good thing she did this back then, because she really wouldn't be able to do it much often after that, when she'd be scare acting. But back then, before she was scare acting, she took over as the Bacanoid team leader, and every legion selected one. And then that legion, as a group, would then go through the house together on the various house tasks. You'd have to try to, and sometimes it was really difficult because not everyone has an express pass. You know, and it gets tricky to get a whole group to go through a house together, especially if it's a 2-hour line. So we try to get as much of a group together as we could, as many people that had express or who might have a gap pass or some other way of going to the express queue. And sometimes you'd have to time it for that gap passes person's away time, and then all the ones with express passes would go in with him, and we'd get a large contingent of our particular legion going in at once, because if you had to do so many houses in one task, you might not be able to do all of them that night and get it done in a night if it involves going to all 8 houses, if you have to go the regular queues in that particular order. Yeah. But so going through in mass, what would happen is the leader, the team leader, would scan that special alliance card first. Then every card that came after her that was registered would also be noted, and the number of people going through at once would give more score. So if you had more Bacanoids going through this task, then the Bacanoids would get more points compared to the others, you see. And that was one way of doing it. Then they made it more. They had a card called Magnify. And so if you go through in a larger group as possible, the points would actually be expanded well beyond the numbers you have, provided you could get as many in a certain period of time. And so that made it even more tricky, trying to do that. But the most insidious special card was given out. It was the Jekyll and Hyde card. And here, this is something Lady Luck would have thought of, I think. You never knew what would happen if you used that card, because it could give you 10 times, maybe 100 times the points you had. Or it might deduct points. And you wouldn't know which it would do until you used it. Eesh. So do you take the risk to get lots and lots of points, or take the risk that you're going to lose points in these house tasks? And they became exhausting. I couldn't even keep up with a lot of the younger people. I let them go ahead without me on some of these because, and also, of course, I was going to Europe. Now I get near the end of the event, a time when I couldn't really attend, but I know about it because I've looked and heard and got reports back. Indeed, the whole time I was in Portugal, I was looking on my phone to see what was going on in Orlando during Legendary Truth. Unfortunately, they didn't have Periscope back then, so I wasn't able to see things as they happened, but I was able to see videos that were made a day or so afterwards on YouTube. So, oh, that's what I was doing last night. Oh, how fun. And of course, there's also a bit of a time difference between Europe and Florida. But in addition to doing tasks involving going through houses and going through the streets to certain scanners in certain orders, for the first time that year, there were points gotten for seeing the shows. There were special, extremely highly sensitive scanning devices set up in the late lamented Beetlejuice Theatre and also in the Fear Factor Auditorium. And if you went to the right Bill and Ted or the right Rocky Horror Picture Show tribute at the right time, based on the clues you received, then everyone with a card who came in, you didn't have to scan anything. All you had to do was walk into that auditorium. If you had a card on you, it would go off on the scanner. And that way, people earned badges for seeing those particular shows, and the legions got more points based on the numbers of people who went in for each legion, you see. So there was special. So seeing the shows became part of the game in the last week or so. Then, the climax of the whole thing. On the final night of the event, I believe, or at least the final night Legendary Truth was played, and I think it was the same thing, people got together in New York Street area, the park on Delancey Street. And there were special presentations. There were things to see and do, but one of the things that happened was everyone went over to a bakery shop. It's over on New York Street. It's still there. And you can look through a window and there's like tables and chairs set up. And it's usually just like a prop set up. But that night there was someone sitting in the little window. Goth Wacky herself. Yes, the same person we'd seen online, the photos with the red hair and the blue fedora. Now alive in person in the flesh, although she's not outside. She's sitting there in that little coffee shop, and talking to her is a woman working for Legendary Truth. And we can see they're having a very interesting conversation. Also, I noticed the lady working for Legendary Truth, who turned out to be Dr. Sadira Karush, was drinking a Bloody Mary. And they have a very intriguing conversation. It looks like they're going to a great deal of talk. Then, strange things began to happen on Delancey Street. Everything went a bit dark, and a weird green light came out on the building right next to Boris Schuster's office. And this green light, a strange silhouettes of hands started grabbing at the window like there might be a zombie or something inside, and thumping noises. What was that about? Not quite sure. Then, a mysterious person showed up. I believe a Chinese person. We're talking 1930s Fu Manchu stereotype, I'm sorry, Chinese Mandarin type with the mustache and the long beard and the robes and the funny hat and glasses. Called him, and as you know, right next to Boris Schuster is a Chinese laundry called Kwang Fong, and this person was called Kwang Fong Neighbor. That's how he identified himself. He was the Kwang Fong Neighbor, and he showed up and he brought out a large basket of fortune cookie, and everyone got to get a fortune cookie. So the tradition of getting a fortune cookie for Legendary Truth on the last night continued. I'm not getting a cookie, but it wasn't a chocolate chip cookie, it was a fortune cookie. More about the cookie later. So after that strange occurrence, all of a sudden here comes, oh my God, Rosie the Fox Girl, and she brings, and of course she wants candy, but she shows up and people get pictures. Rosie the Fox Girl shows up amazingly as part of Legendary Truth. Who knew? She's part of the collective, representing the Morphin Legion. And what's interesting about that is the girl who plays Rosie was working as a scare actress in Cabin in the Woods that year. So obviously they gave her a night off from being the little lamprey mouth of ballerina dancer to come over and resume Rosie for one night. So after all these strange things, there's a presentation on the stage where Blues Brothers, and we have Dr. Thorncastle and Sadira Karush and Goth Wacky and a security guard, and they give a presentation congratulating us on having done so well in our various missions and uncovering all kinds of secrets, and there was more to come. Then after that, TJ Manorino, one of the masterminds behind LT, shows up to give a talk and back and forth and congratulating everybody. That seemed to wrap everything up. But there were some new things discovered about the Legion bloodlines. That the senior staff of Legendary Truth are always 6 people, and they all represent one of the bloodlines, you see. Although, not everybody we saw were senior staff, but they were represented that night in all the things that they had been seen. Dr. Thorncastle is a Mashorian. Sadira Karush is a Strengoid. The female security guard was a Cerebin. The mysterious Quang Fong neighbor was the Bacanoid. Rosie, of course, is a morphin. But what about the Karazhan? At the beginning of all this, Gothwacky told us on Facebook, before any of it started, the Karazhan are different. What did that mean? The Karazhan are different. Well, there was that hand in the window. Was that a Karazhan? Was that a zombie lurking back there? Or maybe the Karazhan are different simply because the whole damn park was covered with damn zombies that year. So did we really need another one? I don't know. But whatever the case is. But Dr. Thorncastle wasn't kidding. First of all, open your fortune cookie. Pull out the fortune. Ooh, yummy cookie. But the fortune was a cryptic cipher. But again, we had learned to solve ciphers and quickly deciphered it. It read, "Beware the horror within." What could that mean? Some thought maybe that's the theme for Halloween Horror Nights 24. Oddly enough, Halloween Horror Nights 24 didn't have a catchphrase. But the horror within would come up again in Legendary Truth over the next 3 years and would start to point to something evil inside, perhaps inside all of us. So that was a warning and perhaps a portent of what was to come, or it could be within some other place, going through a portal perhaps. At any rate, beware the horror within. But that wasn't all. Because after the event was over, after the final night of Halloween Horror Nights, we began to find more stuff on the website. In fact, those games, you could continue playing those games well into 2014. I don't think the games were taken down until summer or maybe even later. People were still playing those games online, for scoring points to their legions like April, May, June of 2014. Wow. But we found stuff on the website, specifically on the mansion levels. New levels became accessible. There was an office, perhaps Dr. Thorncastle's office. There was a computer monitor, and you could click on it, and it included some videos and other texts, and we discovered what we did not yet know. Remember Evil Takes Root and the PS blog I talked about at the beginning of these Horror Nights 23 videos? Yes, all those silly clues at the beginning. Who was PS? We learned, in fact, that PS was a young lady named Paige Steerington. Yes, Dr. Richard Steerington's daughter. And that she had been sent away by her father before he disappeared, we now know was killed. She was sent away to Austria, to Salzburg University, to study there, to keep her safe. You see, something terrible was being planned. A ritual sacrifice. Shades of Cabin in the Woods. Yes, indeed. Turns out that video that had been the commercial for Horror Nights in Hollywood in 2010 that they reused as the commercial for the event in Orlando in 2013, it wasn't just reusing the old commercial. The 5 kids in that video were ritualistically killed in that forest because each one belonged to one of the different legions. Those kids were a Morphin, a Cerebin, a Strengoit, a Mashorian, and a Karazhan. And they were slaughtered as part of some diabolical plan, perhaps to do with Fear himself. Maybe that's why Fear disappeared at the end of it, and maybe that's why Jack got out of the lantern, because they couldn't complete that ritual. I don't know. Why couldn't they complete the ritual? Because there was no Bacanoid to be sacrificed. The Bacanoid victim was Paige Steerington, who, like her father, Richard Steerington, had been the Bacanoid for Legendary Truth. She had been sent away by her father before he was murdered, and she was safe in Austria, and therefore the ritual was not complete. Perhaps that's why, ultimately, Gabriel fell from grace. And it turns out that's exactly why Ignatia Himmel couldn't be found. After her crimes were revealed, apparently she was being incarcerated in a sanitarium in Switzerland, according to what we saw on this computer monitor in the mansion. However, she didn't stay there. And somehow she's found a way back. And somehow she's managed to avoid any criminal prosecution for her crimes, and now says she never did any of those bad things. But that would be later. A later year, not 2013. In 2013 we thought, haha, good for her. They got her. Turns out that's not quite exactly right, unfortunately. So that uncovered the mystery and connected at last the event to the PS blog and the publicity marketing campaign, working a way of fitting it all together into a cohesive thing after all. Clever, clever. Now, before I continue any further, there was special merchandise that year for Legendary Truth. Special merchandise. They had those tall coffee mugs, silver with the Legendary Truth emblem on it. They had little patches you could put on your jacket and stuff for all of the different legions, the different legion symbols. You know, there was the green hand for the Karazhan, the sort of blue mask for the Morphins, the purple dragon for Bacanoid, etc., etc. All those symbols of the 6 legions. You get baseball caps with the legion symbols on it. Yeah, you could get a Legendary Truth T-shirt, a sort of grey heather type T-shirt with the Legendary Truth symbol on your chest, kind of raised in sort of velvet plush on the symbol itself. The Legendary Truth T-shirt, I really like it. I actually got that on. You could get some of this stuff online during the summer. I got that in the summer online before the event even started, but they were selling in the park as well, and little buttons and all kinds of stuff. So they had merchandise for Legendary Truth. However, that wasn't all the merchandise they had. As expected, they had T-shirts for the event. Here in the brochure that shows some of the merchandise. This, of course, the house shirt for Halloween Horror Nights 23, showing all the different houses. On the back of the shirt, on the front, it said, what was on the front of that one? 23. Did it say what evil has taken root? It might have, but I think it said something else there. I don't remember. I think it was something like, fear will eat you alive, or I forget. I'll have to go back and look at my T-shirt. There was, of course, the whiskey flask with zombies on it, shot glasses, the big tumbler type glass, zombie hat, the zombie hat here. I don't know if you can see it very clearly. Ball cap says Zombie Nation, lanyards. Again, lots of zombie Walking Dead themes. Lots of merchandise. They also had specific shirts for some of the houses. There was a Resident Evil house shirt, just Resident Evil. There was a specific house for a shirt for the house. Let me look at the houses. Trying to remember which is which. Yeah, they had a Resident Evil shirt. They had an no, they didn't have that. They had a La Llorona T-shirt. They had a Walking Dead T-shirt and an Evil Dead T-shirt. They didn't do an American Werewolf shirt that year. They had it the following year, which is weird because 24 was a year they didn't have American Werewolf in Orlando. They had it in 25. They had it in 2013. But in 24 is when they sold the T-shirt. But so they have that as well. So that was amusing. And there was one other bit of merchandise which I must show you, even though I'm running to the end of this video. And I'm going to go get it right now. My favorite piece of Halloween Horror Nights 23 merchandise represented something someone who was not seen in person, although seen in sort of static figure mannequin form in the cabin in the woods. That year's Uni-Mini for Horror Nights, the second Uni-Mini for Halloween Horror Nights, was Jack the Clown, as he appeared in his original costume in the year 2000 with the polka dot suit, and we'll turn him the other way around so you can see all the lovely blood stains on his body. Yes, little Jack the Clown Uni-Mini, which was featured as merchandise for Halloween Horror Nights 23. Even though Jack was technically not there, except, of course, that sort of cameo appearance in static figure form in the cabin in the woods house. And if you didn't look up at the end, you'd miss it. So, that covers all the merchandise. I've done all the shows. I've done all the scare zones and all the haunted houses and even Legendary Truth. Bloody heck! I think I just wrapped up the event of Halloween Horror Nights 23. Yay! So this is the last one. I did it in 22 videos. Next time, I'll be starting my first video on the event of Halloween Horror Nights 24 in the year 2014. So I'll get to that next time. Till then, have fun and pay attention to John Murdy's tweets. That's the first place to look for clues this year. Bye-bye.